probably all seen my stuff, but what Michelle C did, she set up a couple of other sheets, sort of so that we could start going through the big document with 300 some pages of quotes from the hearings that Michelle G and her students put together. But she set it up, so we have types of reform recommendations, legal justification or how it's related to lynching, and then supporting testimony and modification of existing, or if we need to have new statutes. And so she laid out, very nicely, sort of suggestions, sort of, the type of reform, the recommendation, the justification for it. And she set that up for, all of the other tabs as well, looking at symbolic reparations, education, media recommendations, and several of us, kind of, decided to take a section and try to do that, so for example, on the, where is it, symbolic one, since I started working on that, again, I was able to say type of reform, posthumous, and then, on several of these, and again, I've still got to go back and through, but was able to pull out, because it was so easy to find, these quotes, and again, using that pane to kind of just, see the different sections that we have there, was able to find an appropriate quotation from, I think this one was from, say, the Somerset County hearing. So in a nutshell, that's what I was hoping we could kind of start going over, or, see if there are other things that we could or should be doing. I mean, I quite literally, about 3 minutes before I hopped on here, finally made it through all of the sections on reparations. Let me stop sharing this real quick just so I can pull up the Word document, if I can find it. We don't need decent scroll. No, I don't need the entire screen. But anyway, yeah, it's, well, let me just cancel that out. So here, I'll just pull it back up just so we've got that there. But, so we've got, I think, I think a good format in which to put this stuff together. So this will hopefully make life for Leah and Janice that much easier. So this way they can say, all right, well, let's look at, what do we have in terms of symbolic reparations? What do we have in terms of, say, let me see if I can find this again. There we go. Say, for example, going to, what was the other one that I did? Sort of looking at material reparations. Here, let's bring that. So here again, we've got, sort of the category, sort of what's the type of reform, the recommendation, the rationale, and then, I tried to find quotes from the hearings. Now, I still have to get through the the reparations hearing, the 2-day, and look at those. But I think we've got a good blueprint here. So, I don't know if others want to kind of go over or share what they've done with their sections. If you want, I can walk you through what I've got here. Or, yeah, David.
Well, mine can be rather quick because I have not had the chance to spend time with it over the last couple weeks since we met. I am going to be offline from my work over this next week. So I hope that that will give me some flexibility to try to get work on this for a bit. So I believe that I am oriented properly and have like the shared folders on Google. So I feel comfortable with moving forward, but just admittedly have not put that time in just yet for the education section, which I'll be focusing on.
Okay, no, that's great. And again, no shade here because I only got to it yesterday. So, you know, Michelle.
This looks amazing. This looks absolutely amazing. One question I have is there going to be a tab for county and city, or is that going to be spread out? So I know the Commissioner Armenti, you're going to be doing education. So under county and city, there's going to be some that's community education, but also under county and city, there's some that is symbolic, which I know you're doing, Commissioner Curry. So I guess the question is, will that need to be an additional tab, or is the current thought kind of fitting it in where it belongs in terms of these tabs?
That's a good question.
When you say county and city, are you referring to a part of the spreadsheet that we're looking at, or you're thinking about like how the data breaks out across the hearings?
In terms of, and you'll see it in the shared Google Drive, but in terms of both the code book and then that, I don't remember how many pages you noted, Commissioner Curry, but the few 100-page document does have county and city, and it includes community education. There's quite a bit there. There's also preserving, protecting, restoring community history and culture. And then there's like more symbolic measures at the county and or city level. So just either that's going to have to be distributed in the respective categories, or it may need its own.
I think we want to keep everything topically. So I think like if we're talking about symbolic, it would appear in the symbolic tab, but then we could specify in the rows if there are different things that would take place in different counties is kind of what I was thinking.
Yeah, and I think that would make sense for some of the school-oriented. One of the main comments that's already in the education tab is about Wacomico and the lack of African American teachers there. So I think because it is a county-specific recommendation, both quoting it, but also maybe in parentheses, identifying it as a county-specific measure, whereas there are going to be things like statewide social studies framework that will, hopefully apply more across the board. So I can kind of differentiate that way at least.
That sounds great.
Nick, you set us up great and explained what we were doing. I was thinking that for the people that are working on putting recommendations together for particular topics, maybe each of us could just kind of take a few minutes to explain what we were doing, what buckets we were thinking about, and then how we could be receptive to feedback, because we're definitely welcoming feedback from everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just put the link to the sheet in the chat there in case you didn't have it, but it's there. So if you want to follow along, or you want to do it without necessarily sort of what we've got with me sharing here.
And Nick, so
go ahead.
People can't edit it, but they can comment. Is that right?
Yes, I believe. Those of us who sort of decided to take a tab, it's like, yeah, we've got editing, but everybody else should just have commenting, so they can kind of say, hey, what about this, or did you think about this, or you should include this or move this, whatever. But yeah, they can comment but not edit the actual tabs.
Okay. And I also just wanted to check in with Leah and and both of the report writers, and just see, because this is kind of the first time you guys are seeing how we're planning to share our recommendations with you guys. And so I just want to see if you guys had any questions about this format, or any recommendations of something we could do that would make it even easier for you to incorporate our recommendations.
Thanks so much, Michelle, for asking the question. Unfortunately, I'm doing this by phone and I can't see the spreadsheet, but I think I have a sense of what that looks like, and love the fact that you're grouping things by category or topically, as you said. And that will make it easier for us, I think, as we're, finding tidbits here and there. Okay, this is where we throw it, right? And then we smooth it out later. I am though curious about the conversation that you just had about, for example, with Comico and other places where there's standout recommendations that are really specific to that county because of what happened in that county. Prince George's is another one I can think of, and whatever. So are you saying that we still keep it within the category symbolic material, educational, media, law enforcement, et cetera, but then maybe do a bolded quote? Or is it something maybe we include in the executive summary? Because we want to make sure that people don't miss the things that are unique to any given county, right?
Maybe you could do some spotlights in the reports. Like, how when you read a magazine, sometimes some content pulled out in a bubble, and it like highlights it. So maybe that's a way that you can kind of highlight specific things even within categories.
Okay. I mean, that's something I think we'd be inclined to do, but as you saw from the first part of the report, there's 500 pages on. We're going to err on the side of more information rather than less, but we would also like some guidance about how to do that. And so, this is helpful. We can include that as part of the formatting.
And again, I'm thinking that, at least for education, that I'll be focusing on, to that point, if there are, I think somebody just said standout quotes or ones that really drive home the point that we think has been emphasized across various commission events and hearings, that, maybe we can put a comment on the box to say, like, this might be a one that we significantly want to pull out for one reason or another. So some of that can hopefully guide as well what things feel like really significant.
Yeah, just having gone through, I mean, there are a lot of really good quotes that we can pull. I think I was just sort of saying, oh, this one's really good, I'm just going to throw that one in there. So it's like, there might be like a recommendation or two that have 2 or 3 quotes from the different hearings. But what is really helpful, and again, Michelle G., I cannot thank you and your students enough for this, is, just the way that, again, once you bring it up in Word, how it just, it will take you to each section. So I was able to kind of, all right, let me take a look at symbolic. Let me take a look at, sort of the reparations, and, just kind of went through some of the other ones there. But it is just so rich. And again, what is fantastic here is you get a really good sense. Okay, these are things that, have been coming up consistently, because you see it. Okay, this was what they said at Wacomico about this. This is what they said at Prince George's. This is what they said at Hartford, Cecil and Hartford. So, I mean, you get a really good sense of these are the things that are coming up consistently across the hearings. And so I think it's a tremendous resource. So I can't thank you enough for the work that you've done there. Chris.
I guess I'm just echoing what most everybody has said now, is that within the looking for the mental health issues within, and I've only looked at the code book that the coded page that Michelle and her wonderful students have put together,
Mhm.
and just glanced at some of the videos. It really seems very much that there's just themes presenting themselves, and those themes are what, when we look deeper into it, or when our report writers look into it deeper, can see where there are specific paths or specific, and I mean specific to the point of go to the Montgomery County Social Studies office and talk to an individual and set up a class and set up a curriculum, being very specific. That's when I think it could be something that's more about what this county is asking for and different to what another county is asking for. However, generally speaking, I have found the replication of themes in mental health. It has been truth telling, it has been acknowledgement, it has been addressing the trauma, coming up with symbolic representations of what indicates hearing people in about being descendants of racial-based terror, or being descendants of racial-based terror in a community or what have you, that beat down the drum of this is what we have to address. These are the things we have to address. And since they happen over and over and over again, then it becomes, I'd say, secondary. Well, what's the specific way to tackle this? Because these are the things we want to tackle. What's the specific way we want to tackle it? So far, I haven't noticed in what I've looked at any differentiation between one county and another county. It's just been, these are the things that we really want to talk about. These are the things that people kept mentioning over and over again. So we don't want to miss any of these general themes.
Thank you, Chris. That's helpful. Appreciate it.
And Leah, what, in terms of a timeline, you know, we're all working as fast as we can to shore up these recommendations, but what do you see as, like, you know, when you need our final recommendations from us?
And this is Janice. I'm not sure, did Leah make it on? I know she was trying.
So I
Thought
thought I saw her name on the it shows Leah's name, but it doesn't show Janice's name on the who's joined. So sorry about that.
No, it's fine. It's fine. No, but she's in California and I'm in DC. And I know she was trying to get on, and I don't remember if she made it. But
Yeah, it says she's on.
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
huh. Okay. Well, anyway, to answer your question, I meant to go back and take a look at the original timeline that was part of the contract to see, because I have a sense that something is due in September. Am I right about that?
Yeah, I think, September we were hoping to have, full draft, first sort of full draft of the report, and
The entire report.
I think I think, we wanted to have part 2 done by September so we could have, draft done by October, so that way OAG has time to do the things that they need to do to get it out.
Right.
So yeah, I think if we can ideally have this stuff ready to go, so that I would think that, the next full commission meeting, we're going to need to go over this stuff and say, yes, these are the things that we want to recommend. And I presume, it's like we'll either have to weigh in or leave it to Leah and Janice to figure out, what do we prioritize as sort of, top priorities. Because I would imagine there's going to be, there already is a lot, on this spreadsheet. So, trying to figure out what do we put at the top, and then sort of start working our way down.
Right. So, I mean, how realistic is it to expect commentary and by the 22nd of August, 2 weeks from now. Is that realistic on you guys' end? Doesn't that give us, I mean, we didn't set a time or date in September, but ideally sooner rather than later, because everybody has a lot going on. Is that so? It's August 22nd to get you all.
I think for my section, that's feasible.
Okay.
It, a little bit of that is to be determined with my time, but it's good to have a deadline, even if by that deadline I have to say it's not complete, but
Sure.
keep us honest with something.
Right.
Yeah. So
And it's entirely possible that we can start framing some things too, based on what's in the spreadsheet. But we don't want to duplicate effort, right? That you all are already doing, and so
I think one thing you guys could do is looking at the topics in the spreadsheet, maybe start doing like the introductory setup for those sections
okay.
and kind of blocking that, and then
Mhm.
and leaving the specifics until a couple weeks later when you kind of have the green light.
Mhm.
I know for the section that I've read so far, now I haven't been able to get to the video because we're having some internal security issues with seeing the hearings within the archives. Everywhere else is fine, but within the archives, we're having challenges with our own videos. But I just know I have not seen any of the responses being that vastly different. And I guess that's what I keep coming back to. It's really about the same theme that's being hit over and over again. These are the issues that need to be addressed. It's not saying the specific way you have to address it. Like, I don't remember one entry where it would be like, the recommendation was that each person of African descent who is related to someone who is a victim of racial-based terror should be given $1 million. Nothing ever got that specific. So that's not something I feel like we need to provide. We don't need to provide something that says for 6 months, we should have some documented course about blah, blah, blah. I don't remember any of that being mentioned to that specificity. But there are general themes of what should be addressed and why it should be addressed and where it affects and how it can negatively affect a person over time, which is why there's a necessity to address. I think those are the type of things that I would say within a 2-week span, I could probably bear down and see if there's anything different about that. But really, in glancing over, it's just like if you're in a focus group and the person who's doing the flip chart says, okay, I hear you're saying this word. I hear you guys are saying that word. And that's what the way that I'm seeing the notes is what is coming to me. Like, this is what's going over and over and over again.
yeah, I mean, to that, go ahead, Michelle.
I was gonna say, but I think we can also, we don't have to limit ourselves by the recommendations that we have heard from others. So we can go beyond that. We can use the recommendations that the community provided to inform how we shape our recommendations. So maybe they didn't provide that level of specificity, but we still could, and we can still use the community's demands as support for why we're making a specific recommendation. So I just kind of wanted to make that point that we don't have to be limited by what others have asked for.
Yeah. And again, to both, that point and Chris's point, at least as I've looked over, again, sort of the big document, I mean, there isn't a lot of specificity in the recommendations. In fact, that was, one of the things that I found most challenging was, okay, these are sort of broad themes, general ideas that people, are bringing up. And so how do we sort of put a little more meat on those bones, and so that's one of the things that I was kind of grappling with. But, again, we want to be specific, but not so specific that it's not going to get, included, or, it's like, okay, if this is specific to say, well, Comico County, okay, but we need to think, at least I'm thinking, we need to think, sort of broadly what's going to be something that we can apply broadly across the state of Maryland and not just, looking at county or town specific kinds of things.
Another question that I think we had, we know that some of the recommendations are more community-based, let's call it, and others are more legislatively oriented. And will you all be determining, okay, which of these things should we start sending to the General Assembly or crafting as legislation, and which of these things are really more a matter of, let's say, a community foundation funding something, blah, blah, blah. Is that the level of the recommendations that you all are making? Or is that something we should have in our minds?
You're muted, Michelle.
Sorry, in my mind, the recommendations are going to the General Assembly. And if anything, we're asking them to fund something at the community level. I don't think the expectation is the community would raise the money on their own, but that the General Assembly would, set aside funds to support this type of program in these communities. So I'm thinking, all of the recommendations are for the General Assembly to consider creating legislation to implement.
The whole report will go to the General Assembly. So everything that's in to the General Assembly. There could be things that we might individually decide to highlight, but the report and all of its contents goes to the General Assembly.
Yeah.
But it's not up to this court at all to recommend legislative language. That's another animal for another time. Am I correct?
No, I think we can recommend that. I mean, are you talking about in terms of insert here, strike here, like that level of legislative drafting? Like modifying a bill? Like, I don't think we necessarily have to do that, because I think they have staff at the General Assembly that can, figure that out. But I think we can recommend that the General Assembly pass legislation that does XYZ.
Yeah, I mean, they do have a bill drafting office. I mean, that's what Delegate Pena Melnick, on that fateful day at Starbucks in College Park, she pulled out her cell phone and called the bill drafting office and said, talk with them, get me something to introduce. So I would imagine whatever we come up with in terms of recommendations, however they're included in the report, it's going to go to bill drafting, and they're going to look at it and try to figure out how best to turn that into legislative language.
Yeah. And I have just kind of one question, Janice. So first of all, I want to apologize. I know I have not given you guys any feedback on the report. To be honest, I haven't even got a chance to delve into it. I have really been focused on the recommendations piece, and that's taken a lot of energy. And so just now, first time when you said it was 500 pages, that I was like, oh my God, it's 500 pages. And so I have a question that I'm asking completely out of ignorance, because I have not reviewed it. But I'm wondering, is there any way that some of that document that is 500 pages could be turned into an appendix, so that there is a much smaller report that, again, is kind of more at the high level, and then we could reference an appendix that does the deeper dive into all of the specifics and all of the details? Is there a way it could be separated? Because
absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. That was the conversation that was had at the executive meeting.
I was just going to say, it sounds like you were just at that meeting, because that was
right.
Sophie's recommendation. She said, yeah, we need to get it down to about 100 pages total. And so let's take all of those case studies and turn those into appendices. So we're on the same page.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, maybe it'll be 100 pages total, with maybe half that being the analysis, and then the other half being the recommendations.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
same page.
Yeah.
I was like,
Mhm.
holy crap.
Well, I mean, my whole feeling, going into this was, let's just, throw everything, including the kitchen sink in there, and then, if we gotta cut it down, we cut it down, it's better to have to, it's like to cut stuff out as opposed to trying to figure out how do we expand this to get it to 100 pages.
Yeah.
So, it's going to take some time, going to take some editing to be sure. But, that's why I just, let's just write big, write large, and we scale it down as we have to.
Got it. Sounds good. That sounds good. Okay.
Yeah.
So should we break down into our quick overviews of what the recommendations we're making?
Sure.
Elizabeth just raised her hand.
Hand up first. Yeah.
Well, I just had I don't want to get us off topic. I just had a question about the other part of the report, which the first part, which we saw earlier in July. And I know there were some comments made on that first draft that then there was a second email out of the report for comment. And I didn't know, I wanted to check with the authors if you had been successful in getting the comments from the first version that some folks had inserted, or if you were only going off comments that had been inserted in the second version.
Let's see, there was, Sophie sent us something, maybe it was a week and a half ago, that indicated that there were new comments, and we have not tended to those yet because of other issues going on.
Sure,
and so
sure.
we will get to those for sure. But we've tried to tackle every single commentary, every single comment and edit and recommendation, and sometimes it's a citation or something. There's still some citations that are missing that we don't know how to get to. They came from other sources. People had uncredited reports that they wrote, and they made reference to either a magazine article or an oral history interview or something, and did not indicate the source of that information. So we've highlighted that throughout where applicable. But I think there's still some outstanding comments that we haven't addressed yet, but we're trying to get to all of them for sure.
Okay, just want to make sure you had access to them since there had been
Yeah.
sort of two versions and
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Of course.
Okay. Okay, so Michelle, would you like to start us off? Just in terms, since you kind of started
Sure.
that page, sort of that process.
Yeah. So I don't have my computer. I printed out the recommendations
Okay.
that I made.
Do you want me to share on my
if you
screen? That will help.
Yeah, if you want to screen share.
Sure.
So the types of reforms that I made recommendations for are in the categories of changes to police accountability. And so some of those are removing qualified immunity from officers who violate department training or policy, creating an early warning system for officers that have complaints so that they could have early intervention, creating a confidential reporting tool for police to report when they observe inappropriate behavior by fellow officers, strengthening community oversight review boards. So those are sort of I think those are the accountability recommendations I made. Then I made recommendations for different things related to police training. And some of those trainings included involving citizens in the training process so that they would have more exposure to different types of people in the community where they serve, changing how they're trained on using deadly force and kind of raising the bar on that. So a number of different police training recommendations. And then I have police policy recommendations. And so those are things like creating, making sure every police department has a hate crimes task force, that they have access to crisis intervention specialists for people that are in mental health crisis, that they create community outreach programs that focus on building trust with communities that have been discriminated against historically, that they create a community police advisory board that's staffed by community leaders from diverse backgrounds who can advise the police on the community's priorities and concerns, and maybe schedule regular town halls for the community and the police to engage with one another. So those are generally my police recommendations. And I think I forgot to say the topic was criminal justice, but you guys probably figured that out. The topic I was working on was criminal justice reform.
Yeah. The tab is criminal justice recommendations. So
yes. And then, okay, so that's kind of what I did for police. I did accountability training and policy. Then I did a section for prosecutorial reform recommendations, and that touched on the types of evidence that prosecutors could introduce in court, and whether that's informants, jailhouse informants, confidential informants, or whether that's forensic evidence that has been proven unreliable. So limiting how prosecutors can use types of evidence that have like inherent unreliabilities in them. And then, so those are prosecutorial reforms. I include some implicit bias training under the prosecutorial training section. And then I also, and then I have some judicial reform recommendations. One of those is to create a public database that somehow catalogs all the criminal sentencings and includes details about the criminal defendant, so that if someone gets sentenced, they can kind of see how their sentence compares to other people who have been sentenced with similar crimes and similar criminal histories. And that would just be a way to serve as a check against bias in sentencing, and making sure that there is some uniformity and that Black people aren't being sentenced more harshly. So just to bring more transparency into the sentencing process. And then I also recommended that judges, the chief of each circuit court, would have a meeting every year. Oh, Taisha needs to go. Let me wrap up. Taisha, do you have 2 seconds? Because I know I wanted you to get to do your media one. I can shut up. Is she still there?
I can try.
Okay, I'll be quiet, and then and I'll come back. I was almost done, but I'll stop, and then if you want to just tell us what you're doing, and then I'll pick back up.
Okay. All right. So I have 4 recommendations. The first one was for journalism training, and that would foster partnerships between Maryland-based publications like the Baltimore Sun, Capital Gazette, and other papers that have a history of systemic racism in reporting. And my idea was to have those papers partner with the 4 HBCUs in Maryland in order to develop partnerships through the creation of robust student journalists internship programs. And the idea behind this would be to, one, teach students how to not repeat the mistakes of their predecessors, but also to implement integrity in journalism, which is needed now more than ever. Because honestly, I don't know what's going on, but that's another whole conversation. My second recommendation was for media accountability, and we did see this in the case of the Baltimore Sun in 2022 when they issued a formal apology of the way in which they had covered lynchings and just African Americans in the past. So it would really be great if other papers, again, like the Capital Gazette, could go ahead and issue a formal apology, especially for the manner in which they portrayed Black men in the past, where they would literally sift through mugshots and only include mugshots of Black folk that committed crimes, and ignored all the other individuals that committed crimes, even though that number was way higher than that of African Americans. The third idea was to have media history highlighting journalists who covered stories during the Jim Crow era, because there's so many hidden jewels that we don't know about. And since this is not being taught in any curriculum, to my knowledge, in public schools throughout the state of Maryland, I felt it would be great if some of these publications could do periodic publications of articles related to some of these journalistic heroes. And again, not putting a fixed amount of stories on them, saying they have to do it quarterly or 4 times a year, whatever, but just periodic engagement. And also to dehumanize the individuals who were victims of these crimes. Yes, we learned about them in the hearing, and those who attended the hearings or watched online learned about them. But I feel as though there needs to be more robust education around these individuals that lost their lives behind, racial violence. So those are the 4 main things, because I think my main focus was to try to make the African American community in Maryland whole. And I know that's impossible, but when it comes to media integrity, I think that these are the best 4 channels in which to push the idea of what a reparation is, and that is to make the person, the injured party, whole. If anybody else has feedback, like I said, please feel free to email me or send me anything. I'm going to be so much better next week.
Okay.
This is Denise, and this is Denise. And before you go, I just want to make sure I got it right. I only have 3. I have training, media accountability, and media history. What's the 4th one?
There's 2 media histories. The first one is media history, the journalist. So we're highlighting the journalist, specific journalists. And the 4th one was media history, the dehumanized. So the actual victims.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for doing that, Taisha. We really appreciate it.
Oh, no worries, guys. Have a good weekend, everyone.
Thanks, you too, and hope you're feeling better soon.
Thank you.
Aisha.
Take care.
So my last couple of recommendations. So one is to have the judges bring together annually people from the state's attorney's office, the public defender's office, and analyze any due process violations that occurred and try to come up with a plan for how to reduce those going forward. So just having more introspection built into the process. And then also an implicit bias training for judges. And then the last 2 recommendations are outside of kind of outside of the criminal justice system. And one is increased funding for crime reduction strategies that are outside of police. And so that's like youth mentoring programs, job training, scholarship, for people to go to school, prison reentry, things like that. And then the last one is, I actually don't know if this last one should be in my criminal justice section. It's probably duplicative of something someone had somewhere else, but it's just increasing investments in housing, employment, education, mental health, all of those things. Because if those things are stable, then, there's going to be a lower crime rate. And so it's kind of related, but kind of not. So those are the recommendations I have. If anyone has any feedback, suggestions, or anything, please share it with me. And that's all. So thank you.
No, that's great. Thank you. And again, as I'm thinking, again, just with the quotes, but then also, there's a lot of overlap, like when I show, some of the stuff that I did, there are going to be things that, like in the symbolic or in the material reparations things, they could easily be moved to media or one of the other sheets. So, it's just a matter of trying to figure out how best to package it. But yeah, I think if that one, that looks like, it fits with criminal justice. And if we need to, or if we need to move it to another one, or, I don't have a problem with, sort of multiple, mentions of it, because, again, it speaks to the significance of it if it's getting mentioned more than once. So, does anybody else want to go next, or?
I can just go briefly through mine, and just because I only have it in 1 column or 2 columns, and I'm just trying to go through highlighting is what I did the last few days, and just give a sense of what, at least my process at this point.
Okay, you had the mental health.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is just basically taking what was in the code book and looking to see what of it is relating to what could either specifically or generally be regarded issues of health, mentally speaking. And so what I initially have done is, as you see this highlighted in red, and not specifically because it's blood or red or violence, but because it's easier to see than you use paper, use yellow, and that was totally invisible. But just seeing that over and over again, I saw truth telling was something that was specified in so many different categories and so many different recommendations that were spoken of. And whereas to some degree, it's one could think that, well, yeah, duh, of course, truth telling. But I think because of where we are right now, quite frankly, as a nation, the fact that if we could come out of this with one of the things being that to tell the truth is really important, especially even for a African American focused organization and or commission, I think that's really worth emphasizing, because it's not what's being put forth in the national spectrum by at least a large segment of the nation right now. So that is certainly one thing, and that the injustices and the harms inflicted when you don't do that, when you continually either hide the truth or decide consciously not to tell the truth. And as I look through it, it's over and over again. The historical trauma, which again goes back to what we're dealing with right now, is that if we don't address historical trauma, then how can we heal from something that we're not addressing? And none of these things said who said it, but the fact that that is something that also is mentioned over and over again. It's telling the truth and healing, because there's harms that are coming from not telling the truth. So I think those are the type things that I wrote down, which I if there's a column for it, I would write down that could be expressed through a therapy, which could be individually, that goes into, well, what's it paid for? But still, individuals who are harmed by this could be individually treated through therapy. They could be as a group through counseling, where it's, why do I feel this way as a group? Why do I have group think, which actually wasn't in here? But then have forums on racial division, because that's mentioned further down, where to talk to different communities about how across racial division, white and black, because some of the things that said here are literally opposite of what's going on right now. It's what we were doing, such as it says here, I think that's number 8, where it's saying Juneteenth celebrations, preserving Black community structures and museums, which is exactly what's not happening right now. There's the actions that are being done totally against that are something that I feel as a recommendation would quite frankly be to do what we were doing, or what has been done, and which is now having a major pushback, that should be a recommendation to continue in that mode. And also including, and I wish I did know exactly who did say this, but truth telling and restoration for Native Americans, because I think as we move forward as a commission, or as the commission's legacy moves forward, it's that we recognize that this isn't something that's just about people of Black people who were harmed by race-based lynching. It's so many other people of different ethnic backgrounds who are injured, who are traumatized, both specifically and through their history with this type of treatment, and that they could also benefit from this. Because I feel like if we recommend this, and we recommend that it's not just about it for us, but equal treatment for others, we would get more support toward this effort and toward the measures that we're putting forth. And also just PTSD, which I don't know if that's specifically mentioned here, maybe that's something I got from it, is that admitting to the fact that actions such as lynchings, especially when they've been race-based, not because of what anybody did, but just because who a person is or was, are things that lend themselves to protracted trauma and protracted feelings of inferiority and insecurity and fear. Because if it could happen to somebody else just because they're a Black person walking across the street, or because they winked at somebody who didn't take it well, that could happen to me today. So I think it's that wherever it's mentioned here, Lynch impacted by racial terror, violence, and truth-telling acknowledgement of history and the harm done, links it to today. Now, how is that put forth? How do we specifically put it in place? Michelle said it much better than I am right now. It's like there's specific things that would happen that could be formed. I have down panels and forums, but even on a more specific one-on-one basis that could address people who maybe don't want to talk about this in general. They don't want to go to a group and talk about how they feel about this, but maybe they would talk one-on-one, like when we did have living and truth with us. That might be what a person could do if those were the type of, maybe for 3 or 4 sessions it could be free if you said, this is because my family was personally affected by lynching, or my community was personally affected and has a legacy of lynching behind it. I went to the Oklahoma City bombing memorial 2 weeks ago for a conference, and that's got to be a thing when your city is probably known for something that horrible, and you know that that's one of the first things that comes to mind. If you're from that city, that's got to be something in your mind, and something that your kids probably think of too. If they go someplace else and someone says, you're from Oklahoma City, were you there when? Well, I mean, that's a thing that if you're from a community where lynchings happen and there's not anything else bigger, that's got to be something that sits with you. So that would be one of the threads that I see as in this: the truth telling, the trauma, the harm done, recognizing that injustice and moving forward with it. So what I haven't done yet, but this, as I mentioned, the flip charts, is just come up with what those words are that are over and over and over again, like hammering you on the head. Like that's what needs to be, that's what should be addressed. And that's what we probably would be along the lines of what we put forward in a recommendation of the topics that should be addressed, if nothing else.
Mhm. Yeah, well, you got quite a bit there. So, no, this is great. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for the format.
Well, I mean, again, I gotta thank Michelle for that one.
Yeah.
Because that was her genius. Okay.
Just saying, I've got to head out here in a minute.
Okay.
But like I said, I will hopefully start chugging away here over the next week or so, and look forward to any other updates. So thank you all.
Great. Thank you,
Thanks,
David.
Thank
Have a
you.
great
Yeah.
weekend. Okay, I guess I can just kind of walk through the sheets that I've been playing with. I guess, starting with the symbolic. Where, oh, come on, there we go. Again, sort of the one thing that, again, starting with the posthumous indictments for lynch mob members. And again, this was stuff that I had sort of put on the sheet before, going through and looking for the quotes. But, and again, there are plenty of quotes that I can use to come back and do that. Other things that, I guess other folks had put on the sheet, which I thought was wonderful. The full exoneration for victims who have been charged. And again, I sort of looked at that and said, well, only 5, people had trials, and they were pretty much shams, didn't meet the requirements of the 6th Amendment. And then similarly, not all of the folks, received the posthumous pardons from Governor Hogan. So yeah, sort of, engaging in that exoneration, for the crimes. Because again, we just don't know. Again, sort of people looking for, formal written apologies, because we've not had formal apologies before. Again, a lot of folks, saying, preservation, memorialization of historical Black communities, like, East Towson, in Baltimore County. So again, trying to find a way to address all of that in one particular shot. And again, and with this one, I was able to find some things, from the Pauli Murray piece where they were talking about miscegenation laws and sort of how segregation and Jim Crow were used to, to force the separate development. And so, okay, I mean, if this is, it's like you forced us into segregated communities, and yet we build and we develop these communities. Now you're trying to gentrify or move things out. It's like, no, let's preserve these historically Black communities. What's this one? Oh yeah, renaming. And again, which again blows my mind that this is controversial, in this day and age. But again, given where the politics are, it shouldn't be that surprising. But here again, sort of looking to take the names of, unmitigated racists off public buildings and public streets and things like that. This is one that came up a couple of times, sort of looking at making November Remembrance and Reconciliation Month, sort of in celebrating Emancipation Day as a state holiday. That got mentioned, more than once. So again, soil collections and other forms of, setting up markers. Mock trials, which I thought was interesting, which again, I should probably move that up to, going with the posthumous indictments. But there again, I think it was, the people in Montgomery County were particularly suggesting that, and then also in Frederick, that we should have mock trials for these folks. Now, how, we go about doing that, I don't know, but I figure we can at least put the recommendation in. And then burials. And, this was, again, coming out of Somerset, where several people said, yeah, we weren't able to give our ancestors proper burials. So, and again, given the state responsibility, for protecting them, it strikes me that, yeah, we should have, the state should pick up the tab for whatever symbolic, it's like memorial service or burial, if we can actually do a burial. But again, to give those families and those communities, some measure of closure. And then these were a couple other things, again, sort of having, church and civil society organizations taking responsibility for their participation, and establishing local and community and county level organizations to look into, the history of racial violence and the disparities. So that's symbolic. The material reparations, again, and again, I'm sorry that, those quotes just kind of get really, they just seem long, but, again, starting with Black empowerment, because again, a big part of Jim Crow, Black economic success was seen as us getting out of our place. That struck me as sort of, a deliberate and intentional underdevelopment of Black communities, so that we would have to work, for white communities, or, basically for, the enrichment of white communities, but not Black communities specifically. So calling for, state support of Black communities and Black businesses, poverty reduction plans, akin to the Marshall Plan and the Great Society, again, stemming back from that history of intentional economic underdevelopment. Again, housing was another thing that came up several times. So again, trying to figure out how best to make sure that we have fair and equitable housing. And again, the folks from ADOS, monetary material compensation. And again, I specifically put in a couple of quotes, to kind of show the difference of opinions, when it comes to talking about monetary or material reparations, that should be part of a larger plan, or there are, it's like, again, got one in there to say, no, it has to be about money specifically, and it has to be specifically for American descendants of slaves. So again, I wanted to at least get that, and again, I think I have over here, just sort of another one piece. Oh, I missed a spot. Anyway, I'll clean that up later. What else? I think, looking at African American reparations. And here again, these are things that I think we could probably move to other categories, but again, like looking at, tuition, free tuition for Black folks who want to study to become therapists, sort of looking at that community healing as an option. What else do I have? Here again, news media, again, trying to talk about, making sure that they provide adequate and fair and balanced coverage of Black communities. And again, sort of helping to develop Black owned media. Let's see, automatic admissions. Black students, because again, given the history of segregation and the de facto dual education system, we should be able to get students, Black students, free law school, so if they're going to go into prosecution, so that we have, sort of a diversifying of the public, the state's attorneys and the public defender's offices. Free mental health for Black communities. Free training for, Black folk that want to go into, become counselors or therapists. K-12 Black male retention initiatives, because again, I see this in higher education, the feminization of the academy. It's like women are very quickly becoming, majorities here. So again, men, and particularly men of color, are rapidly disappearing from the academy. I'm trying to think if there was anything else. Oh yeah, and the policy. So, and again, a lot of these were coming from, things that we had done before going through, but here again, looking at, things to make sure we get the history of racial terror lynching in the textbooks, K-12 and college, and making sure that they're required. And again, giving school districts the resources, akin to the settlement for the, for the 4 HBCUs, which was what, about $500 million, was it 500 million over 10 years? They should do something similar for K-12. And again, here again, sort of no insurance settlements, or, sort of getting into the qualified immunity. And again, the insurance. So this way, if they're using, unauthorized or, use of lethal force, the state or the city isn't going to pick up the insurance. That's going to have to come out of their pockets as a preventive. Again, police academy training, similar to some of the things that Michelle had on hers. We can probably move that over, consolidate them. Police funding to going towards mental health initiatives. State support for programs, again, sort of unlearning the trauma informed behavior that we've accumulated over however many years. Again, housing, looking at, sort of changing zoning laws and zoning policies so that we can protect and preserve Black communities. And again, sort of thinking in terms of, what's going on in, Israel, Gaza, West Bank, we should have right of return to neighborhoods. Let's reclaim those Black neighborhoods that are being rezoned or gentrified. Well, Black folks should have, that right of return to those neighborhoods that were theirs. And again, protecting African American institutions, cemeteries, churches, green spaces, incentives to develop, affordable housing in Black communities. expunging criminal records. And again, that's probably something that we could move over to the, the criminal justice ones. But anyway, so yeah, that's in a nutshell. And again, if people have ideas, comments, criticisms, questions, I'm certainly open to them, and certainly feel free to edit as you think appropriate, since we're still sort of working that. Let me just stop sharing here. So yeah, that's kind of where we are.
I think we definitely have a great start. We're all making lots of awesome progress. So
Yes.
go team.
So, yeah, there will be plenty for Leah and Janice to work through.
Sounds like it.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll definitely be keeping you busy.
I wanted to share one framework that I'm using in terms of like, okay, who gets these, benefits? And definitely I'm applying them as broadly as possible, to your point, Chris. So like when I said, oh, the police need to consult with a diverse group of community members, I don't say African American, right? Because it's like the more we can make it generally applicable. But where I do try to, sometimes if I do want to make something specific, the way I've been limiting the group is by saying communities that either experienced the lynching or where the descendants of people who lived in those communities currently reside. And that way it's casting a very broad net for Black Marylanders without making it about race. It's like, oh no, it's not really about race. It's about, this is the communities that were impacted by lynching. And so I just wanted to throw that out there as a framework and kind of explain, especially for the report writers, when you guys see that, just explain why I wrote it that way, is so that it was really to tie it to the harm that we're remedying, but still will mostly benefit, or will benefit most Black Marylanders, because I feel like probably most Black Marylanders have ties to a community where one of these lynchings occurred.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Yeah.
All right, guys, is that it?
I think so, unless
There's only 4 of us left, so
yeah.
we've whittled down.
All right. Well, we're taking a family trip to Canada, so we're driving up to Canada just to check it out for no reason whatsoever.
Where? Which? I actually was looking like the last couple of days. I thought, well, if I was to go to Canada before it becomes Canada, America, where would I?
No, I say,
Amy's in Canada this week too. I was like, oh, maybe I'll see you in Canada. We're doing Montreal, Quebec City, and Toronto.
Oh, okay. Nice.
And we're driving it. So we're, cool. Driving up and then just driving around Canada.
That should be a beautiful drive.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, take care, everyone.
Thank you as well.
Thanks everybody for all of your great work.
Oh, Elizabeth.
Sorry.
We were just talking about
taking
a trip to Canada.
I just had 2 quick questions. Are you wrapping up now?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. All right. 2 questions. One, a comment. We might want to note in that chart, as you adjust the chart, that the Winder marker came down in 2020. So it's a good example.
Yeah.
But it was removed, just so we all know that it was removed. And then the question I had going through this was, did we have any reports of where victims might have been buried? That I came into this wondering if GPR could serve any purpose, ground penetrating radar, to try to locate the bodies of victims, that we knew the general vicinity of where they were taken, but would there be any reason for that to be a strategy? But we might not have enough information or enough specific information that a GPR survey of an area to try to locate an individual who's the victim of a lynching would make sense. But I wasn't sure.
Hadn't thought about that, but that's definitely going in there some way.
Okay.
No, that's a great idea. And again, I know, from having read them, we don't know where most of them were buried, and again, a lot of the reporting doesn't didn't mention where they were, or, I know in a couple of cases, when family said, nope, we're not accepting the bodies. It's up to you to take care of it because they were in your custody. And it doesn't say where they were buried, but I think at least to kind of say, hey, have we thought about this? Is there a way to figure out where they are? Or, let's get, the ground penetrating radar and see, can we find, what do we find? Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, that was all I wanted to add. Thanks.
No, that's a great addition. Thank you. Okay, so I guess we can call it a meeting, and I guess, since we're not having an August meeting, so
Right.
we'll get back together, I guess, at the beginning of September. So, all right, well, just, folks, keep working away, and, it's like the more we can get on there, hopefully the easier it will be for Leah and Janice to put together part 2.
Absolutely. And just keep August 22nd in mind, because we ended up being delayed with part 1 because of the volume of information. And we really don't want to bleed into, we want to be able to have something at some point in September. Again, nobody ever set a date, but we really want to stick to the original timeline so that,
Okay. All right.
All right.
I think we're off to a good start, and so let's just keep it going.
Great. Thank everybody. This is really
Thanks.
wonderful.
Have a great weekend.
Good weekend.
Thank you.
Good
Good
Canada.
travel. Yeah.